Hey guys, welcome back to the wood shop again. It took me a minute to get some more videos put out. We've had some things come up, but this week I want to talk about if you're in the market for a bandsaw, you may be interested in getting this one. It's the Rikon 10-324 TG. So if that's something you're interested in, stick around. Okay, so the first point I want to get to is the reason they call this a 10-324 TG. What that stands for is Toolless Guides, and if you're familiar with the bandsaws, some of these use these bearings to guide the blade. Some of them have carbon blocks and that kind of stuff, but these touch the blade as they're going down to keep it in line. And the reason, like I said, the TG stands for Toolless Guides. Now they do make another version of this that's just a 10-324 that has an Allen wrench, or excuse me, an Allen bolt here. It uses an Allen head, and I'm sure it works fine. You take an Allen wrench, loosen it up, get it where you want it, and then tighten it back. This one is as simple as just taking your fingers, loosening it, moving it in and out, tighten it back up. Okay, so one of the reasons I wanted to show this video, I don't like really giving a review on something until I've had it a while and know the ins and outs of it, and if I feel like it's a good tool. And I do feel like this one's a good tool. There are a lot of pros, a couple cons, but not enough to make me not recommend it. First off, I want to get to some of the specs of the saw. And so this one, as you can kind of see here, it's a little dusty. I don't have the dust collection hooked up on this one, but this is a 1.5 horsepower motor. Of course, that's just going to depend on the work you're doing. Now, if you're a large production shop, this is probably not going to be for you. Me, for the most part, my work is hobby work or just kind of a side gig. You know, I do sell things on the side. And for me, this works great. It does everything I need it to as far as power goes. One of the nice features about this one, that I've had a smaller bandsaw, you know, years back, that the reason I wanted to get this one was because of the Resaw Height. The last one I had was only 6 inches, and if you can see over there, I've got a wood lathe, and so I do a lot of wood turning. And a 6-inch does okay for certain things, but I had a lot of bowl blanks that were higher than 6 inches and made it a little difficult about cutting those. And so it was, I needed to get something that's a little higher. I also wanted to be able to cut down smaller logs into, I guess you'd call them mini slabs. And you know, I do a lot of what you would call maybe jewelry boxes, that kind of stuff. But anyway, one of the features about this I really like that my previous bandsaw did not have is this thing right here. When you got this thing on, that is holding all the tension on your blade. And to save your bearings and that kind of stuff, the wear on the saw, you can actually release this and it takes a lot of the tension off the blade, so it's not constantly holding pressure. And so that's a nice feature. And if you look over here, it may be a little hard to see, but one of my favorite things about this is the on and off switch. This switch has a very positive on switch and very easy off switch. So you know you're not going to touch this by accident and accidentally turn it on. So it's a good safety feature. So guys, as you can tell, I really needed a wider blade on right now, but I've had this one on here so I could cut bowl blanks and not bind up the blade. So I just wanted to see how good it would cut through there. And you can tell, other than a few little parts here that was probably more my fault than anything, this is very smooth cut for the bandsaw especially. Now this particular bandsaw can work with, I can't remember, I think it's, you can go up to a 3/4 inch blade and as small as a 3/16 blade. And right now I've got a 1/4 inch blade on this one, like I said, just for cutting bowl lengths. And it does really well. I did have the 3/4 on there. That makes it a breeze when you're doing resawing. But as far as the overall thoughts on this saw, I would highly recommend this one. The previous one I had was a 10 inch, what they call it. And like I said before, it didn't have a lot of resaw height. And so that was the big factor for me. I don't have a heck of a lot of money. And so I had to go with what I could afford. And this one at the time was somewhere around, I want to say $900, which is a lot of money. But for the resaw capacity, that was kind of on the lower end of the budget for the height. I could get other ones cheaper naturally at a lower height, but that, you know, that was kind of defeating the purpose of what I wanted to do. Okay, we're getting ready to cut this. One thing I wanted to point out about this saw, not only does it have the height adjustment makes it a breeze to just move this thing up and down, which I will recommend if you do buy this saw, or any of them as far as that goes, to keep this little, I guess they're going to call that a rack and pinion, those teeth right there. And I actually do need to clean mine a little bit, but they're working good for the time being. But keep that pretty clean. Keep a little, you know, maybe WD-40 or something on there to keep that lubricated, because that you know, allows that to move very smoothly. This right here can lock that if you want it set at a certain height and, you know, not worried about moving it up and down. And one other feature I like about this one that my previous saw did not have, come down here, they call this thing a trunnion, which kind of works like the other, and you can see I've got a little bit of a wax on there to keep that thing from, you know, binding up. Basically, this is the stop on it. You can loosen that, move this, and what that'll allow you to do is to tilt this table here to pretty much any angle you want. I mean, of course, it does have limits. I think it goes to probably 45 degrees or somewhere in that neighborhood. But if you need beveled cuts and stuff, that's handy for that. For the most part, I keep mine at, you know, 90 degrees to the blade for what I do, but that is a handy feature. Okay, another thing I want to add to, as far as, you know, not forcing the wood through, these, on any bandsaw, it does take a little bit of adjustment to get these set up right. We could have a whole nother video on adjusting a saw blade or a bandsaw, you know, as far as the bearings, how they need to touch and that kind of stuff to get a straight cut. Tension is a big part of that, you know, and this is one of the examples too. There is a chart inside of here, and forgive the dust. Like I said, I don't have dust collection hooked up to this right now. But this chart in here actually shows you, you know, if you got an 1/8 inch, you know, 1/4 inch, whatever size blade that you're putting on here, it's telling you to adjust this piece to that number. And I will tell you, and if you look at any other reviews on this saw, and probably many others, this is, you know, do not pay attention to that, because if you do what I've got at a, you know, a 1/4 inch blade, which is on there right now, you can see I've got this thing set to about 3/4, and that's a pretty good amount of tension. And if you do what it actually goes by, and you run that 1/4 inch blade at the 1/4 inch adjustment, good chance you're not going to be very tight on your blade, and that can lead to wavy cuts as well. Okay, guys, you can see as of right now, we've got this blank cut at least halfway through to where I can make the circle part of that. One thing I want you to notice, you know, it may not be laser straight, but you can see how straight that is. One thing you want to, you know, pay attention to on a bandsaw, especially, I mean, any tool really. First and foremost, you want to make sure you let the tool do the work. And what I mean by that is, if you're not familiar with bandsaws, don't be forcing that wood through there, because when you do that, for one thing, it's going to bind this blade and you're going to get wavy cuts. And even myself, I had to, you know, kind of teach myself not to rush through it, because it's going to just make you have to do more work at a joiner or the planer or whatever when it comes to that. And you can see it is very wet, but it is pretty doggone straight. And this is, I don't know if I mentioned it before, but this is red oak, but it is wet, and so it's a little softer at the moment, and so I imagine that's going to transfer to the lathe. So let me get this set up and we'll finish cutting out the rim. So we got this blank cut through, and you can see I'm not perfect on the mark, but you know, the lathe will take care of that. And you can see, other than, you know, me just backing out of the cut, how smooth a cut that is. And we've got some nice inclusion of some sapwood there. So that should make for a pretty interesting piece. This piece, it's about 6 1/4. Of course, the time I run that on the lathe, that's going to come down, you know, probably a fair amount. And of course, this will go away. And we're about 5 1/2 inches tall, and that should make for a pretty good, you know, mortar and pestle. One thing that was pointed out to me, if you're not especially familiar with a bandsaw, the screaming it makes, it kind of hurts your ears in a way. It's not the most pleasant sound, but I've been told by many of the pros that if your bandsaw does not make that noise, you've probably got something wrong with it, because just about every one of these, unless you've got a big industrial one, is going to make that kind of a screaming noise. And I honestly personally don't know what causes that noise, whether it's the blade binding on the, what they call the tires of the wheels, or what it might be. But every one I've ever had has made that noise to some extent, and no issues there. So we're at the end of this video where, you know, I give my overall thoughts. You know, the unboxing I had a little while back, you know, at least for me, you know, I'm just starting down YouTube and not expecting a lot of views at the moment. But I unboxed a, you know, Wind brand dust collector, and, you know, I've had some pretty good response to that. And so that's one reason I wanted to get with this. You know, I've done some project videos that didn't really take off. But like I said, you know, I'm just starting out, so I don't expect a lot of that. And that is a name brand, and so I kind of figured that, you know, might be what people are kind of drawn to, and so that's why I wanted to do the review. If I had to get this thing a number, you know, 9 out of 10, whatever it might be, if we were going on a scale of 10, I would get this thing at least a 8.5 to a 9 out of 10. Like I said, there are a few cons I don't like about it. One thing, when I got this, I was checking for square here and here, and then also to the back. And maybe it was part of it is maybe I didn't have the blade on right, but I did have to adjust the table. And I'm not talking about the angle gauge, but more this way. And that part can be a little bit of a pain because there's some Allen screws in there that you have to loosen, and they're not in a very good spot. Maybe the other thing I don't like, this little gauge here, it might be hard to see on camera, but there's a gauge that runs along this bar. It's probably not the most accurate thing. And then the other thing is when it gets to right about here, see, that stops just because of where they got this bar located. And so if you're needing something to an exact dimension, then you have to raise that up, scoot over, and come over here. And so that allows you to lose, you know, a decent chunk. But in the same regard, you could always set this up, use a sacrificial fence, and get your cut done. But that's just minor gripes. And thinking about it, I don't really know of any other thing I would complain about. All these dials work great, adjusting it, you know, it's got a lot of possibilities there. One thing maybe I would add to it is if this tension wheel had the handle that sticks out here like this, because that can be a little bit of a chore to turn that if you can't get a good grip on it. Oh, and one thing I do want to mention, I said before, I don't have dust collection hooked up to this. I have seen a couple of people talk about the dust collection on these isn't great, but you know, me being that small one I've got over there is the first one I've had, so I don't have it a lot to compare to. And so in that regards, I would say any dust collection is better than none. And tonight I just didn't feel like moving everything over here for just a couple passes. But regardless, I want to say this is a great saw, highly recommended. And if you know me personally, I do sales for a living. I do not recommend things that I, you know, wouldn't truthfully use. I'm not going to, you know, I'm not sponsored, so I'm not going to tell you this is a great saw when it's not. So I'm not getting paid or anything like that. This is just my honest review. If you're in the market for a bandsaw and you've got the money, which I did have to save some money, sell some things, sell some woodworking projects to get this one because it was a little out of my budget. But I do highly recommend it. So that's all for that. And I want to say, if you've made it this far in the video, I appreciate you watching. I would appreciate if you subscribe, and stay tuned because I've got a couple more videos lined up. That I've got another tool review. I do know people like those, and I've got the project of the mortar and pestle coming up. You know, and other things too that I'm just not setting my mind around. But anyway, until next time, I'll see you then.